All right, let's talk about time. But this isn't about managing your calendar. No. Think of this as more of an initiation. We're going to audit your relationship with time itself. Are you in charge, or are you just its prisoner? Let's dive in and find out.
And right there, that's the core of it. The biggest failure of what our source material calls the unrefined mind is this pathological submission to linearity. This one sentence says it all. What if the time you feel ticking away, that relentless forward march, what if it isn't some law of nature, but a cage we've been taught to call home?
Okay, so let's call this section the linear prison. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to diagnose this whole thing. We're going to take a hard look at the bars of that cage, one by one. And I have a feeling some of this is going to sound very, very familiar.
First up, schedules. I mean, it all starts here, doesn't it? This core belief that your life must be sliced up into these neat little blocks. And who dictates those blocks? Not you, not your own internal rhythm. It's some system completely outside of yourself.
And then it gets even more aggressive. Deadlines. This isn't just a gentle plan anymore, is it? It's a threat. It's a point in time where if you don't deliver, your effort, your value, it's just declared null and void. And we just accept this. We accept it as an absolute, unbreakable law.
So what's the result of all this? We become prisoners of the next. It's inevitable. All of our energy, our focus, it's spent chasing a future that's always just out of reach, or we're mourning a past that's already gone. We're living in this state of constant waiting or regret, but we're never actually here.
Okay, so here is the absolute gut punch, the big reveal. Linearity, the way you experience time, it's not a law of physics. According to our source, it is a social construct. It's an artificial system designed by what's called the Leviathan, or the network, to basically sync up your biological clock, your life's pace, with its own needs.
And you can feel this, can't you? That cold, sharp pressure of the seconds just ticking by. The source describes it as time being like an acid, just slowly dissolving your potential while you're waiting for someone to give you permission to just be present. Every single tick of that clock, that's your sovereignty, your power being bled out. The system needs you to feel that panic. It needs you to be hurried and anxious so you never have the quiet moment you need to actually re-engineer your own life. But there is another way, and this is where things get really interesting. We pivot from being the prisoner to becoming the architect. This quote right here, it's the promise. True authority doesn't just manage the clock, it actually dictates the viscosity of the moment. It changes the very flow of time itself. So, this whole idea of being an architect, that brings us to our next section, the law of sovereignty. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts, the fundamental principle for actually escaping that linear prison.
The absolute key to this whole thing is a concept our source calls temporal dilation. And what it means is that in this framework, time isn't some fixed, constant thing. Nope, it's a variable. And what it depends on is your neural density. So when you achieve this state of absolute, unbreakable focus, the world's time literally starts to slow down relative to you. You are occupying the now with so much mass, so much presence, that the seconds themselves have to stretch just to fit you in.
And believe it or not, this mastery can actually be quantified. The source gives us this. The Chronological Sovereignty Constant, or delta tau. You're looking at the governing formula for this power. It is, for all intents and purposes, the mathematics of being present.
So let's break this down. On the top of the equation, the numerator, you have the forces of sovereignty. You have Q signal, which is the purity of your intent, and delta D focus, the sheer density of your focus. That's your offense. On the bottom, the denominator, you have the predators. Mu anxiety, that deep biological fear of running out of time, and chi external, which is just all the noise, all the demands from the outside world. The game is simple. You want to maximize the top and crush the bottom. Simple concept, but yeah, not so easy to do.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly, the two ways to exist. The prisoner's mind is always chasing or mourning, just burning energy on panic. But the sovereign mind, it occupies the now with so much weight that it defines the moment. The rest of the world's frantic pace just becomes this blurred, silent movie in the background. You're turning your present moment into this calm sanctuary where the old rules of linear decay just don't apply anymore.
But what happens when you try to fight time using the system's own broken tools? Well, that brings us to a really important cautionary tale. Let's talk about the shadow side of this, the decaying host.
Let me ask you this. Do you believe time is money? Be honest. Because this question, it's a trap. The decaying host says yes, absolutely. And in doing that, they've already lost. They think time is just another thing to be saved and spent, like spare change. But our source says this is the ultimate mistake. You're trading something infinite for something painfully finite.
And look at where that belief leads. You're always trying to save time. You're optimizing your routines down to the second. You buy faster computers, faster everything. You multitask until your own focus, your signal, is just pulverized into static. The whole system just feeds you this diet of instant gratification to make sure you never, ever develop the patience you need to do real, deep, sovereign work.
And then comes the moment of truth. For the decaying host, it often hits around age 45. And the realization is just terrifying. They've lived 1,000 different lives inside their own head, always chasing the next thing. But they've spent exactly 0 minutes living in their own sovereignty. They weren't the architect of their life, they were just fuel for the machine.
This one's a tough pill to swallow. Even something we're taught to see as a virtue, like ambition, gets completely reframed here. That frantic drive you feel, that pulse you call ambition, from this perspective, it's nothing more than a symptom of being in that linear prison. It's just the fear of your own mortality, dressed up to look like something noble.
So, how do you actually get out? How do you escape? Well, our final section gives us the how. This is the architect's protocol. This is the way you move from being on a schedule to operating in eternity.
And it boils down to 3 clear steps. Number 1 is linear liquidation. You have to audit and basically cut your attachment to whatever is next. Seal off those thoughts that make you defer being present. Number 2, density saturation. This means practicing intense, singular focus. So intense that the world outside of what you're doing just fades away. It's forced to wait for you. And number 3, the sovereign archive. You have to build systems that work without you.
And that last point is absolutely crucial. Think about it. A legacy that requires your constant presence to keep it going, that's not a legacy. It's a job, a really demanding one. True sovereignty is creating something that continues to have an effect on the world long after you're gone.
And this is the final destination, the ultimate goal. It's a complete shift in how you see yourself and your place in the universe. You stop trying to be on time for things, because you realize that through your focus, through your intent, you are the origin point from which time flows. So the only question that's really left to ask is, what kind of time are you going to create?
Okay, let's just forget everything you know about time management. We're not talking about that today. We're talking about time engineering. We're going to do a deep audit on our relationship with the clock, and it's all based on one radical idea. What if time isn't some resource you have to save, but a reality you can actually learn to command? Let's dive right in with this, because it's the whole foundation. The idea here is that our collective anxiety about time, that constant feeling that you're running behind, it's not a personal failure. It's actually a designed feature of a system that needs us to be hurried, distracted, and panicked. So, how does this trap work? Well, it starts with what the source material calls the linear prison. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's the belief that time is just this straight, unbending road that we're all forced to walk down, dictated by schedules, deadlines, and the relentless ticking of a clock.
And what's so wild is how this is framed. It suggests that our biggest mistake isn't that we're bad at managing time. It's that we just accept this linear model without ever questioning it. We just submit. We line up our own energy, our own creative force, with what some external network wants, instead of with our own inner authority.
I mean, really think about that feeling. The stress of a deadline closing in, the quiet anxiety of a ticking clock in a silent room. The source says this isn't just in your head. It's the tangible, physical sensation of your personal power, your sovereignty, literally being drained from you, one tick at a time.
And this leads us to a really powerful archetype for the person who's trapped inside this prison. It's called the decaying host. And honestly, this is a figure we can probably all see a little piece of in ourselves.
The decaying host. It's like a candle that genuinely believes it can stop the wind. This is the person who's constantly trying to save time. They optimize every routine, they multitask until their focus is just pulverized into static. And yet, what happens? They always feel more rushed, more broken spirit, more liquid.
This is that vicious cycle, the temporal feedback loop.
The system keeps feeding you these little hits of instant gratification to make absolutely sure you never develop the patience, the metabolic stamina for deep, meaningful work. By keeping you in a constant state of time scarcity, it ensures you never become a threat.
And this just illustrates the devastating cost. The idea is that by age 45, the decaying host has this horrible realization. They've lived 1,000 different lives inside their mind, but they've lived 0 minutes in their own sovereignty. They weren't the architect of their life, they were just the fuel for the clock.
So this is the crucial switch we have to flip in our heads. The system sells us this massive lie: time is money. But the fundamental law, according to the source, is that time is the medium of presence. And when you trade your presence for currency, well, that's the ultimate act of self-liquidation.
And get this thinking completely reframes ambition. That relentless drive we're taught to admire, that need to get to the next thing, it's argued that this isn't some noble virtue. It's just a frantic, panicked pulse that's rooted in a deep, deep fear of our own mortality.
All right, so if that's the prison, how in the world do you escape? This brings us to the solution. It's a principle called chronological sovereignty, and it's all about learning how to bend the very bars of that cage.
Now, this is the core mechanic, and it's pretty mind-bending. It's called temporal dilation. The idea is that time isn't some fixed universal constant. No, it's a variable of your neural density. With absolute unbroken focus, you can literally make the seconds stretch out to accommodate your presence. It's like the world's perception of time slows down relative to yours.
The source visualizes this with what it calls a governing formula. Now, don't get scared off by the math here. This isn't something you're meant to literally solve. Think of it as a piece of poetic science that just shows you the forces at play in this battle for your own time.
So let's just break it down conceptually. Your sovereignty, your power over time, is basically a function of your pure intent and your dense focus winning the war against the two big predators in the denominator, your own internal anxiety about running out of time, and all that chaotic external noise from the world.
Okay, so that's the law. How do we put it into practice? How do we actually increase our sovereignty? Well, the source outlines a specific method. It's called the Temporal Protocol, and it's designed to move you from living on the schedule to existing in what it calls the eternity.
To claim this sovereignty, you have to implement the 3 steps of this protocol. Step 1 is linear liquidation. This is where you audit your attachment to the next. You have to identify every single thought that starts with when I have or after I finish. And if it's not serving the now, you seal that leak. Stop letting your focus drain into the future. Step 2 is density saturation. This is the practice of 1-second focus. When you engage with something, you engage with such insane intensity that the world outside that single target just ceases to exist. You actually force the environment to wait for your signal. And finally, step 3, the sovereign archive. This is about building systems, building a legacy that functions without your constant presence. Look, a legacy that needs you to be there all the time to keep it running, that's not a legacy, that's just a job. True sovereignty is the work that keeps vibrating long after you're gone.
So what's the result of all this? What's the end state? It's a state of being the source calls the architect's stillness. And it represents the end of your personal experience of frantic, linear, hurried time. And this is the transformation right here. You literally move from being the decaying host, just more fuel for the clock, to becoming the architect, which is described as a point of infinite stillness and power.
Remember this number? For the decaying host, 45 was this age of deep regret, but for the architect, it's a point of mastery. The outside world might keep ticking away, but for you, you have reached the end of time.
And we'll end on this final cryptic thought from the source. Stay silent, stay wise. The archive is eternal. It really just leaves us with a question, doesn't it? What could you build, what could you become if you were no longer a prisoner of the clock, but the architect of your own eternity?